Rock is dead. 3 words I never said, and 3 words that I've heard come from some of the biggest names in rock. And for those of you that say those 3 words, rock is dead, I have 2 words for you. Fuck you. As long as I've got my music from any era or genre, rock is still alive to me. I'll see live shows today from bands of the 80s and bands that started last year. You're going to tell those people that show up to see those bands that rock is dead? What is dead is the rock scene. There were great rock scenes from Bay Area thrash to New York City hardcore. I know Jersey had a pretty good scene in the 80s. But the only scene that I can speak of is my favorite scene, the Hollywood rock scene of the mid to late 80s. I'm here to tell you that that scene truly is dead. And I know it's not just because I'm old. I've gone back regularly to check on it with the hope to see a spark of excitement on the Sunset Strip. But nah, it's like a ghost town. And yes, sometimes you'll get a band at the Whiskey or the Roxy, but it just isn't a scene. We'll go to the Rainbow Bar and Grill and we'll see some people that maybe we know, but it's not a scene. The Sunset Strip scene was so damn alive in the 80s. But if you went a little south from the Strip, we had our own little scene called the Cathouse. I'm Riki Rachtman. Yeah, I was the guy that hosted Headbangers Ball, but before that, I ran the Cathouse. I'm so damn proud to say that the Cathouse, even though it closed over 3 decades ago, it's cemented in rock history. It was sexy, it was dangerous, it was legendary. You probably have read about Cathouse in some of those rock books talking about that era, or you heard of some of the notorious tales of sex, drugs, rock and roll. On the Cathouse Hollywood podcast, I'll not only take you back to that time, retracing some of these stories, but also talk to some of the players in our game that were there. I'm telling you, it ruled. It was so much fun, but it was also filled with occasional heartache as well as elation. But it was great. It was downright decadent, and I do miss it sometimes. Those players that I mentioned, they happen to be in some of the biggest rock bands in the world, and they will join us on the Cathouse Hollywood podcast to remember that time. I have launched this podcast before. When it was released, I kept it only to the Cathouse scene, which I knew would kind of shorten all the different topics and stories that I had. I spent much of 2023 and 2022 on the road doing a one-man storytelling show called One Foot in the Gutter. And I took all the podcasts down because I like to tell a lot of those stories on stage, and I didn't want everybody to say, oh, I heard that on the podcast. But now I've looked at all the episodes, and I'm starting to record new ones, and I've read so many stories by journalists or social media fools trying to talk about the scene, even though they weren't there. But you know what? You're going to be there, being here, listening to the Cathouse Hollywood podcast. The Cathouse opened in September of 1986, but what made me decide to open a club with this guy, Taime Downe, the lead singer of Faster Pussycat, and who without his help, this wouldn't have ever happened. Who was Taime? How did we meet? What led to the opening of Riki and Taime's world-famous Cathouse? And I think that none of this stuff would have happened if it wasn't for some stripper's birthday party. In episode 1, we're going to go back before the Cathouse. Taime, Trina, Keith, and myself will bring you back to that time. Back before there was a Cathouse. Back even before Riki met Taime. This is episode 1 of the Cathouse Hollywood podcast. The Cathouse Hollywood podcast is sponsored by, oh yeah, there are ads. What kind of ads? It's sponsored by CathouseHollywood.com. Do you know there is a place you can get authentic, high-quality Cathouse Hollywood merchandise and some Headbangers Ball items as well? You got to go to CathouseHollywood.com. There are some freaking scumbags bootlegging Cathouse shirts, but you can tell the quality is shit. The only place to get good quality product is from CatHouseHollywood.com, and we're constantly coming out with new merchandise as well. Now, let's return to the Cathouse Hollywood podcast. I know I wouldn't be doing One Foot in the Gutter if it wasn't for my time hosting Headbangers Ball on MTV. And I would never have been the host of Headbangers Ball on MTV if it wasn't for a club that I opened called the Cathouse. And there never, ever would have been a Cathouse if it wasn't for Taime Downe, the singer of the band Faster Pussycat. Taime and I were roommates in the 80s, and we had this crazy idea to open up a rock and roll dance club. Not with live bands, just dancing to rock and roll. The reason that Taime and I opened the Cathouse is because we wanted a place that we could get free drinks, that we could party with all our friends and not have to clean up the next morning. And the truth is, and it sounds so cliche to say it now, we did it because we wanted to meet girls. And the Cathouse was that, and so much more. The Cathouse ended up allowing a few live bands to play. Bands you've probably heard of, like Alice Cooper, Guns N' Roses, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, White Zombie, Megadeth, Motorhead, Primus. Geez, the list goes on. But it wasn't the bands that played at the Cathouse that truly made it world famous. The Cathouse opened in September of 1986. This is before bands like Guns N' Roses ever released a record. When you put it in that context, it does seem like a long time ago. I'm going to go back even further. Before anyone ever walked up the rotted, moldy stairs that led to the upstairs bar of Riki and Taime's Cathouse. A matter of fact, it's March 1986. And I had never even met the guy that eventually would start the band Faster Pussycat. The guy that was not only my roommate, partner in crime, brother from another mother, but to this day, my best friend, Taime Downe. In March 1986, gas was 89 cents. The Space Shuttle Challenger had exploded 2 months ago, killing all 7 astronauts. Top Gun and Platoon were big movies in the theaters. The first Legend of Zelda video game was released. In March of 1986, Van Halen started the 5150 tour. First show with Sammy Hagar singing. In March of 1986, Cliff Burton was still alive and in Metallica. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers. Yeah, it was a really long time ago. Dance clubs in Los Angeles were really big in the 80s. In LA, a local promoter would take over a club for a night, promote it, make flyers, book the DJ, doorman, and it was their club. You might go on a Thursday when a certain promoter ran the club, and the line would be around the block. Next night, a different promoter, and it was a ghost town. There were hip-hop clubs, goth clubs, new wave clubs, top 40 clubs. The clubs would be really hot, then die out in a year or so, many times less than that. Each club would have a DJ. Those DJs may go from venue to venue during the week, and many times built up quite a following. I know this because I was one of the DJs. And a DJ in those days meant showing up when the club hadn't opened yet, carrying 3 to 4 heavy milk crates of vinyl records. No, not CDs, not a laptop with a USB. Those guys aren't really DJs. Yeah, I was a club DJ carrying records. I worked the Los Angeles dance club circuit. Monday nights, I was the DJ at La Hot Club. I'd start with a huge goblet full of whiskey and play, dance music. Dance music for white people. For white people that did cocaine and went to Laker games. I'd play Rock Me Amadeus from Falco or West End Girls by the Pet Shop Boys. Word Up from Cameo. I played dance music. And I'm not going to lie, I liked some of the new wave bands of that era. But I was still a rocker, just not in the rock scene. I didn't even have many rocker friends. I remember one night at La Hot Club, 1984, maybe 85. There was this girl named Angela Nicoletti. She was the hot, crazy chick in high school. I mean, we were kids, but even in her early teens, she knew rock stars. But she was also very popular among the people in the dance clubs. Angela would come into the hot club, work the room, while her boyfriend would hang out with me in the DJ booth. He was a rocker and felt out of place, so he would find sanctuary with me drinking and talking about rock and punk and this band he was in called Hollywood Rose. I'd run into Izzy again a few years later after he had started Guns N' Roses. Other than La Hot Club, I DJ at Walla. Sometimes I'd help MC their bikini contests. I remember thinking those contests were pretty cheesy back then, but the women were fairly outstanding. It was ironic that I would roll my eyes at how degrading it was, and then I'd end up dating a few of them. One of the girls, who also worked as a mud wrestler at the Tropicana, was named Robbie. I remember her telling me about this cool scenester guy she had met. He had black nail polish. She showed me his business card, which had a picture of Marilyn Monroe, and then said, "Taime Downe if you can." It was 6 months before I ever met Taime. Other than La Hot Club and Walla, there was another club I have yet to mention. I was not only the DJ, but I was also a co-promoter. Friday nights, it was Ice. Ice was located at 836 North Highland in West Hollywood. The club was actually called Probe, a hardcore gay bar, but it wasn't open on Friday night, so it was perfect for Ice. The Probe would eventually become the home of Cathouse in August of 1987. For a dance club, Ice was pretty cool. Maybe I'd throw in AC/DC Back in Black, but my job was to keep the dance floor packed. So in addition to being the DJ at Ice, I promoted the club, which meant passing out flyers to lure people to come to the club. Ice was on Highland and 1 block away from Melrose. In the 80s, Melrose Avenue had everything you needed if you were part of the underground rock, goth, art, punk scene. A killer record store called Vinyl Fetish, run by Henry and Joseph Brooks. Joseph would eventually become the DJ at Cathouse, and he was very influential in Guns N' Roses getting a record deal. Also on Melrose, you had cool clothing stores for those that like to live on the edge, or at least dress like they did. Flip, Let It Rock, Poser, and Retail Slut. Retail Slut opened in 1983 by Helen O'Neill. Despite it specializing in attire for the outcasts, Meryl Streep, Madonna, Robin Williams all shopped at Retail Slut. One of Retail Slut's employees was a Seattle transplant by the name Taime Downe.
Back in 1985 is when I got 2 jobs in one day, working at the Troubadour at night and Retail Slut down on Melrose during the day. Retail Slut was fun because we had all our friends working at the different stores like Jet Rag, Let It Rock, Flash Feet, and Vinyl Fetish. It was like, it was the hangout for this rock and roll scene. At night, you're out at bars at the Rainbow and the Roxy and the Whiskey, and during the day, you're hanging out on Melrose. So it was a lot of fun. A lot of people come through. Michael Jackson. I remember selling Slash his first hat. He says he stole it, but he knows what happened. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of crazy stuff that went on down there during that time.
One of the benefits of working at a store with a constant flow of customers is you meet a lot of people. And in between the fitting of a new pair of red vinyl pants, you can tell the customers about the first live performance of your new band. And that's what Taime did, because in a few weeks at the Central, which later became the Viper Room, Taime would play the first show with his band, Faster Pussycat. The rock scene was quickly becoming hip in Los Angeles in the 80s. Punk rock was dying, and a lot of that was brought on by clubs not wanting to book punk bands in fear of the type of crowd they might bring. There was heavy metal pizza places like Mazzotti's in Huntington Beach, the famous Rainbow on the Sunset Strip. Everybody back then went to the Rainbow. Even the supermarket became known as Rock and Roll Ralph's. There was a hair salon called Long Hair Rocks, and you could get your haystack haircut while listening to bands like Dokken or Rat. Trina Ortegon worked at Long Hair Rocks. Trina was dating my friend Keith Cooper. I was dating Trina's friend Cindy, who was another one of the Tropicana mud wrestling girls.
We decided to have a birthday party at the Rainbow. So we were able to get a great booth, have a big birthday party, see all the rock and roll stars, and hang out. We also had booked a hotel room back off of Highland Avenue and near Franklin. We decided to have the after party at the hotel. We would invite everybody. We'd been hanging out at the Rainbow for a little while, and some people were showing up and sitting in our booth and sharing their time. One of the people that showed up was Taime. He was promoting his show. He was going to have his first gig with Faster Pussycat. We invited Taime and several others to our after party at the hotel.
If you are a rock historian and have been to Hollywood, you have more than likely been to the Rainbow Bar and Grill, which is on the Sunset Strip, right next to the Roxy, which is down the street from the Whiskey, which is across the street from the Viper Room. All the rockers went to the Rainbow. It's been that way for decades. The Rainbow was a hangout for rock musicians and groupies way back in the 70s when you could see Keith Moon, Alice Cooper, John Lennon, Ringo Starr, even Neil Diamond and Elvis Presley went to the Rainbow. If you wanted to see Lemmy from Motorhead, you could find him at the Rainbow Bar with a Jack and Coke. So Trina's party was at the Bow, but I wasn't there because that night I was the DJ for a dance night at the world-famous Whiskey A Go-Go. As the night was winding down, Trina and Cindy decided to leave the Rainbow, grab me, and bring me to their after party. There were always after parties back then. The clubs may close at 2, but many times our last drink coincided with the sun coming up.
While we were hanging out at the Rainbow and everybody was doing their thing, Cindy and I took a little jaunt down the street. We went in for a quick little visit, drove to the back of the Roxy, loaded your gear, and took you back over to the hotel with us, where later Keith showed up, who I was dating at the time.
Keith Cooper is my oldest friend. We went to high school together. We weren't really friends in high school. I was a punker and he was sort of the jock type. But somehow during our new wave, rockabilly, Duran Duran, Motley Crue phase, we became friends. I have to come clean. Yes, I had big, poofy, long hair. But I really didn't have many friends in the rock scene. I wasn't part of the rock scene, actually. Keith was even more removed than I was.
We were a couple of kids from the suburbs in Los Angeles. Riki was dating her friend Cindy, and we went to this party. It was Trina's birthday at a hotel in Hollywood in the Cahuenga Pass. And we showed up there, and of course there was a bunch of these rocker-looking people, that city-looking rockers. And one of them, the dirtiest, grungiest, gothic-looking one of all, was this guy Taime, and we had met him, and again he was just so goth looking and totally unlike anyone that we associated with at the time, and it was a little intimidating. And but he turned out to be a great guy, and Riki was chatting him up, and we all had fun and we hung out.
Taime was there really trying to promote his show, so you could see the two of you. I'm going to tell you, the two of you started hitting it off, and you and Taime are conspiring in the corner, cracking up, promoting one another right off the bat. Hooking up like you're Lucy and Ethel. Rock and roll history right there.
I had to talk to other people regarding this night because honestly, I can't remember much. And to be honest, Taime wasn't much better.
But I remember meeting Riki and Keith. I just remember we were drunk. It's a blur. It's so far back. You know, I'm old. So I don't know. But I remember meeting him and him giving me a flyer for a club called Ice. It's a blur. We were kids and drunk, so that's all I can really remember about that.
At some point, Riki said, "Hey, I run this club called Ice, and you should come by." And so Riki said, "Just come see Keith, and he runs the door, and we'll create a code word." And I remember we were watching this movie at the time, at like 3:00 in the morning, and it was some stupid B movie, black and white. Don't even remember what it was about. All I remember there was like a prison riot with a bunch of guys with shaved heads. And Riki, being Riki, looked at the TV, said, "Okay, the code word is
bald men behind bars." The only thing Taime, Keith, Trina, and myself could recall was that there was endless booze and something about bald men behind bars. We were watching some old movie. It had a jailbreak in it, a bunch of prisoners, and they were all bald. I told Taime that night to come to my club, Ice, and go up to the doorman and say, "Bald men behind bars." Okay, it seemed funny at the time. Keith Cooper worked the door at Ice.
This scary-looking rocker dude shows up, and I did not admittedly have immediate recollection of him, but he comes up to me with this very sincere, innocent look on his face, and he said nothing other than "bald men behind bars." And immediately, I'm like, I had this flashback. And, of course, I let him in, and he went inside, and Riki hung out with him the rest of the night. And at that point in time, Taime invited us. He was playing his first show, I think, in Los Angeles. And we went, and Riki and Taime started talking and hanging out. And it was really from that night that the Cathouse was born, because Riki came up with the idea for the Cathouse, which seemed odd at the time, I might add, a rock and roll dance club. But Riki needed an authentic rocker to validate the club as a rock club. And Taime was that guy, and they started talking about it. And it was a perfect fit and a perfect marriage, and it was from there that the greatest rock and roll club in history was born that night, that very night.
So I saw Faster Pussycat play that first show. It was at the Central. About 50 people were there, which means the place was almost full. I thought they were raw, had that gutter feel for sure. Eventually, they get signed to Elektra Records. Their debut album was released in 1987. In addition to Bathroom Wall, it had a song called Cathouse. There was a Beastie Boyish song called Babylon that featured my DJ skills when I did the scratching on the track. 2 years later, Faster Pussycat recorded their most successful album, Wake Me When It's Over. That album went gold and had a single, House of Pain. Keith would eventually become the doorman at Cathouse. He started his own clubs, Cabaret and the very successful Camp Hollywood. Keith then dropped out of the scene for a little bit, went to law school, but is now a successful attorney living in Los Angeles, and he's married to Allison, a girl that he met at the Cathouse, and Keith is still a very good friend of mine. It's still a trip to me that Taime and I opened the Cathouse 4 decades ago, and it's mind-blowing that I can pick up pretty much any book about the 80s and 90s rock and roll scene, and somewhere in it, there's stories about the Cathouse. So did you have a good time? Check out my other podcast, the R, Riki Rachtman Radio. Thanks again. I'm Riki Rachtman. Remember to keep one foot in the gutter, one fist in the gold.